contact lens practice and how we got to where we are today. The emphasis of my lecture will be on cosmetic contact lenses because that's probably what I'm best known for. And I think we're ready to start. So the question I'm usually asked is how I got the title optometrist to the stars. And to explore that, we have to explore the Greenspoon family history. And the other question I get asked is, how on earth did you get the name of Greenspoon? And my grandfather came over from the Ukraine, and when he got to Ellis Island, they said, "What's your name?" And he said something that sounded like Greenspoon. And they said, "Well, okay, from now on in, you're a Greenspoon." So here we are, 116 years later. So my father, Reuben Greenspoon, was a 1921 graduate of the Rochester School of Optometry. It was one of the early optometry schools, and it was located in Rochester, New York, and was financed mainly by Bausch and Lomb. And to become an optometrist in those days, you had to have 2 years of high school and 2 years of college, which made life easy. So he graduated from the Rochester School of Optometry, and he set up practice in Brooklyn, New York, with his brother, Dr. William Greenspoon. And during that time, he met one of the early contact lens pioneers by the name of Dr. William Feinblum. And Dr. Feinblum sort of brought him up to speed on what the state of the art was at that point. And you have to realize that there was only one material that contact lenses could be made of, and that was glass. And you'd probably shudder at the thought of it now. But the early scientists, like Sir John Herschel and Kalt and several others, hypothesized in the late 1800s that if you had a case of keratoconus, that a good way to treat it would be to put a glass shell over it and fill it with what they called animal jelly. I don't know what animal jelly was, but it was some kind of a thing to fill in the irregularities. And contact lenses were primarily a modality for low vision, irregular corneas, and keratoconus. Nobody ever thought they'd be useful for anything else. And in order to fit them, it was quite a laborious process. The way most people fitted them was the impression method. You used a hydrocolloid that the dentists use, jelly-like material, and you put it in a cup and put it on the eye and made a mold of the eye, and then you poured dental stone into that mold, and you had theoretically, a replica of the eye. And then you sent that replica to Germany, to Carl Zeiss, and they blew a lens over that matrix of dental stone, and they would grind an optical section. And that was the first contact lenses, mostly used for keratoconus. The process of modifying these lenses was extremely difficult. An ophthalmologist by the name of Joseph Dallas was the first one to give us a method for fitting them, and he was the first one to tell us about sodium fluorescein, so you could tell when the lens was tight, loose, etc. And then if you were very adventurous, you could take a rubber wheel and an emery stone and modify the glass lens. But it was, I remember my father used to do it, and it was a very laborious process. So I was born in 1929. In 1935, my father sold half of his practice to his brother and moved to California. And through a quirk of fate, he settled down in a new town called Beverly Hills. And the family story goes that he and my mother were driving down Wilshire Boulevard, and they came to Beverly Drive, and there was a high-rise building just finished. And my father says, "What's this?" And she says, "A new town called Beverly Hills." And he says, "This is where I'm gonna go into practice." So he went into practice in this building that had everybody in the movie business in the building. All the agents, et cetera, talent. And so he got to know a lot of people in the movie business, people in the makeup business, et cetera, et cetera. And one day, one of his friends, a fellow by the name of Ben Nye, who was the head of makeup at 20th Century Fox, said, "Reuben, we've got this script that we haven't been able to figure out what to do with it. And it's a detective story, and the plot calls for the villain to have blue eyes, except to the end of the movie where the detective, played by Robert Young, pulls out a suction cup, pulls the lens out, and says he's wearing those new invisible spectacles doctored up to change the color of his eyes." And that was the first use of a contact lens for movie special effect. And the way that it was done with a Zeiss glass lens, in which my father put a ceramic material, painted a ceramic iris on it, ran it through a kiln, and hoped that the ceramic material would bond to the glass before the glass melted. And it worked, and that was the first cosmetic lens. And in the movie, you'll see a clip from that historical film. And the movie was called Miracles for Sale, and it was 1939. And about that time, it became impossible to get lenses from Nazi Germany. And the supply of glass contact lenses was cut off. But, very fortuitously, a German company by the name of Roman Haas had come up with a new material, an acrylic material, a plastic, called plexiglass. And the United States government seized that patent, turned it over to DuPont, which renamed it Lucite, and at the time, it seemed like the perfect material for making a contact lens, because you could cut it on a lathe, you could grind it, do all kinds of things. So the only thing we didn't realize was it wasn't very oxygen permeable. But we solved that problem later on. And so my father made a press for making those lenses. And what he would do is take the mold of the eye, and then he would heat a sheet of plexiglass, put it in the press, and set it down, and then push the mold of the lens up into the piece of plexiglass, and he had a sort of contact lens. And then what you had to do was trim around the edges, do the edges, grind an optic, and you had something that was fairly workable. So his original press, which is interesting, is on display at the AOA library in St. Louis, as are some of his other things that he invented. So the relationship between the new technology of contact lenses in the movie industry started in 1940, when my father made a colored short for Paramount Pictures called The Eyes Have It. And you'll see a clip of that short, because that short was the first time the public was given any inkling as to even the existence of a contact lens. And as you'll see in the short, the claims are sort of overblown of what a contact lens can do, but that's Hollywood. So next comes my story. I'm probably one of the luckiest optometrists in being in the right place at the right time. My folks settled in Beverly Hills, and I went to Beverly Hills High School. I used to sit up in geometry on the back lot of 20th Century Fox and watch them shoot movies. And I thought, boy, that's what I want to do, because I was a school photographer. And I said to my father, I want to be a cinema photographer. And he was somewhat disappointed.